Hey guys, this is Meditation Amsterdam. My name is Pablo, and in today's video I want to do a long-awaited, by me in any case, review of the book The Pearl Beyond Price by A.H. Almaas. The book is right here, and I mentioned this book once in a video before as undoubtedly one of my top 5 and almost certainly a top 3 book for me. And the value of the book is manifold, but Almaas has done a unique study in bridging the apparent gap between psychology and spirituality so that they can be reconciled and seen as a continuum in an attempt to reach the highest levels of human development that we can go for. And as such, this is not going to be a one episode review, and in fact it's not even going to be a book review as such. It's going to be, to do it justice, in my view, a series of videos in which I explain all the key points that Almaas makes in his book. I may or may not do all the videos about the book sequentially, but I will make sure that I include them in a playlist, which I will call The Pearl Beyond Price, so that they can be watched sequentially after the fact. And I think that's going to be quite a valuable little series for anyone who's interested in the topic. And so I would start the first video with the introduction that Almaas sets out for the book, where already you see him hinting at some very interesting thoughts that you don't see out there very often, and which set the stage to what's to come afterwards. And so he starts with a chapter that he calls The Man of Spirit and the Man of the World, in which he explains how there has been, for a very long time, a divide between those who think that developing our individuality, developing our person, and being the best that we can be, and growing as much as we can grow, and acquiring as much as we can acquire, whether on the level of the material, the emotional, or the spiritual, is the way to go. And those who believe that the spiritual path of renunciation, of no self, and of really putting ourselves at the or being subjects to something greater than our individuality is the way to go. And for a long time there has been a chasm between these two ways of thinking that Almaas sets out to try and reconcile. And we can recognize that chasm fairly easily, as a matter of fact, right? So if we look at the most part of modern psychology, for example, of which he makes a point right from the start, for modern psychology, the highest development of the individual is the goal. So everything revolves around really the health of the individual as an individual. And that proves to be just an incomplete view of things. On the other hand, you have the spiritual view of things, in which whether you develop your certain abilities and how you conduct yourself, sometimes is downplayed. Sometimes through very high-level statements such as "you are one with everything." Mundane aspects of our life, whether it is our emotional life, our intellectual life, can be downplayed quite a lot. And there is also another element about the spiritual classics, and maybe even some modern spiritual teachers, which don't have a real way to explain the ego properly. That domain is or has been actually figured out by modern psychology. How did the ego come about? So that object relations theory and developmental psychology have a lot of smart things to say about how the ego forms in the first place. And spirituality has a point of view that sometimes is a little bit awkward. I have read spiritual classics that say things along the lines of, it's a great mystery, we don't know how this thief comes about, or the ego is evil, right? So this is the big bad wolf in the story, and it's a trickster. I have heard modern spiritual teachers say that we are pure awareness, but we kind of forgot that we were, as if that was some sort of plausible explanation or a kind of workable model that can get us somewhere from that point of view. Whereas Almaas says that's not good enough. If we want to be serious about our spirituality, we can't just say, well, the ego is bad and we don't know how it came about, but here we go trying to dismantle it. We're going to use the very best tools that we have to understand how the ego comes about. And already in this first chapter, Almaas shares a very interesting insight, which is pivotal to the rest of the book. And that insight is the idea that our biological birth does not coincide with our psychological birth. In other words, before we are a psychologically formed individual, we are something already before that, as we are born. We are a biological sentient entity that doesn't have any sense of individuality at the start. And then our first task is to understand how we go from mind at large, biological entity that has no psychology whatsoever, to the forming of an egoic psychology that is, in the view of modern psychology, quite an achievement actually. It's a big achievement and a big attainment to become an ego. And it's important to understand exactly how that happens so that the tools that we employ later on to dismantle that ego are well informed and effective. Now, the other thing that Almaas shares with you in this first chapter, which is also an incredibly great insight, is that the spiritual path cannot possibly be about ending up in some sort of a kind of a void or an impersonal whatever that doesn't satisfy our personal goals and our material, emotional, and intellectual life. Almaas makes a crucial point in saying that for a solution to be real on the spiritual level, it needs to satisfy every level of the individual and align them all fully. Nothing gets left behind. There is no space for things that don't satisfy the intellect, for example. Things that you simply need to believe because it's grace or because it's dogma or because it's ineffable. Of course, in the greater scheme of things, everything is one big ineffable God knows what. But so long as we are trying to become an individual that is whole and round, then all our levels need to be developed by whatever endeavors we are taking upon ourselves. So this is essentially the first episode of the review of the book. I wanted to give that introduction as thoroughly as possible. In the next one, we will be going into more of the details of how the ego starts to form. And it's going to be quite an interesting one. At least I found it to be quite fascinating because it dispels so many weird notions that we have sometimes in the spiritual community. It makes us far more well informed about what science has to say about things, and suddenly things start to really click into place, and that's a very empowering information, I think. So as I said, I'll be doing some more of these videos about The Pearl Beyond Price. It's a phenomenal book. It is to me not so much of a mystery, the fact that it's not a modern spiritual classic. I don't think it is, because it's a highly technical and nuanced and very detailed book. and therefore it suffers from not being sort of simple and flowery like some of the other books that have made into the kind of bestseller level type of books. But nevertheless, it's a pivotal book, and I will try to hopefully do it justice in this series. Very curious what you have to say in the comments about this one. And as usual, if you think that this information is beneficial to others, then your liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel makes it altogether more available. And I'll be back pretty soon with more. And until then, cheerio, and thanks for listening. Bye-bye.